Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're diving into 3 bone-chilling true stories. Tales of ordinary people plunged into extraordinary terror, all saved by the most loyal companions imaginable, their dogs. These aren't just pets, they're heroes, guardians, and sometimes the only thing standing between us and unimaginable horror. If you're ready to have your fur stand on end, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying true stories. This story is based on true events, shared by those who lived through them. Let's get into it. Our first story takes us back to a quiet suburban night, years ago. I was about 16, blissfully unaware of the darkness lurking just beyond the familiar. My parents were out, leaving me in charge of my little sister, a responsibility I honestly wasn't taking too seriously. My focus was entirely on a brand new video game, the kind that swallows hours without you even noticing. Beside me, sprawled across my bed, was Sheriff, our big, beautiful German Shepherd mix. He was a gentle giant, usually content to snooze through my gaming sessions, a warm, reassuring presence. The only sound in the house was the low hum of the TV, the rhythmic clicks of my controller, and the occasional sigh from Sheriff. It was a picture of perfect, uneventful domesticity. Then it happened, not with a bang, but with a subtle shift in the air, a tiny tremor that only a dog could perceive. Sheriff's ears, usually floppy and relaxed, suddenly perked up. His entire body went rigid. You know that instant primal alert posture dogs get? Tail stiff, head lifted, eyes wide and locked onto something invisible, something only they can sense? That's exactly what Sheriff did. He was frozen, a statue of pure, focused attention. My game paused. I instinctively reached for the remote and lowered the volume, strained my ears, listening intently. Nothing. No footsteps on the porch. No voices from outside. No creaking of the old house settling. Just in profound, unnerving silence. Probably just someone walking their dog outside, I rationalized, trying to shake off the sudden unease. I shrugged, dismissing the feeling, and went back to my game, trying to immerse myself back in the digital world. But Sheriff didn't relax. His low, guttural growl vibrated through the mattress, a sound that immediately cut through the game's soundtrack. It wasn't a playful growl, or an annoyed one. It was a warning. He slowly, deliberately stood up, his muscles bunched and tense. His head was still held high, scanning the room, then the open doorway, as if searching for an unseen threat. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he bolted. Claws scratching a desperate symphony against the wooden floorboards, he tore out of my room. A second later, his barks erupted from the hallway. Sharp, frantic, and filled with a raw intensity I'd never heard from him before. They echoed through the usually quiet house, bouncing off the walls, making my heart leap into my throat. "Sheriff, stop it," I yelled, my voice cracking with a mixture of annoyance and dawning fear. But my command was useless. His barking only grew more violent, more desperate. This wasn't the kind of bark a dog makes at a squirrel or a mailman. This was the kind of bark dogs make when they're not just scared, but when they're defending, when they sense imminent danger. That's when the chilling realization struck me. My stomach dropped like a stone. My hands started to tremble. I scrambled off the bed, heart hammering against my ribs, and followed the terrifying sound. Sheriff's frantic barks were coming from the basement. He was at the basement door, a solid oak barrier, scratching at it with such force it sounded like he was trying to rip it right off its hinges. The noise was deafening, primal. I hesitated, my blood running cold. The basement lights were always off, a cavern of shadows, and that basement had always freaked me out, even in broad daylight. It was a place of cobwebs and forgotten things, and an air of perpetual chill. But then, as if sensing my fear, Sheriff let out a deafening roar, a combination of a bark and a growl that literally shook the house. He charged down the stairs, his massive body a blur, his growls echoing off the concrete walls. My instinct screamed at me to run, but something deeper, a sense of duty mixed with growing terror, compelled me forward. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from the kitchen drawer, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I crept towards the basement door, each step on the wooden floorboards creaking under my weight like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. When I finally flipped the light switch, illuminating the dusty, dank space, Sheriff was standing completely still. His body was a coiled spring, facing the laundry room door at the far end of the basement. His teeth were bared in a silent snarl, tail rigid, every muscle in his body taut. I whispered his name, but he didn't even flinch, his focus absolute, terrifying. Then I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible creak, the sound of wood bending, groaning under a hidden weight. The laundry room door, which had been securely shut, slowly, agonizingly, began to open by itself. My blood ran cold. I froze, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand, fixed on that slowly widening gap. Just as a dark shape began to coalesce in the shadows beyond the door, Sheriff lunged forward, letting out a series of ear-splitting barks, a furious, protective frenzy. I didn't even think. I screamed, a raw, desperate sound, turned, and scrambled back up the stairs as fast as my legs could carry me. I slammed the basement door shut with all my might, the sound echoing through the house, and fumbled with the old, rusty lock, twisting it into place. For a few agonizing seconds, there was silence. A terrifying, heavy silence that felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Then I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy, coming up the wooden stairs from the basement. My heart nearly exploded out of my chest. I fumbled for my phone, fingers shaking so hard I could barely dial, and called the police, whispering frantically into the receiver while Sheriff continued to bark non-stop, a relentless wall of sound at the locked door. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens a blessed, comforting sound. Turns out a man had indeed broken into the house through a small, rarely used basement window. He'd been hiding down there, God knows for how long, perhaps waiting for us to fall asleep or worse. When they dragged him out, his clothes were filthy, his hands bleeding from the broken glass of the window he'd smashed. As they put him in the police car, he glared at me through the window, a cold, hateful stare that still gives me chills even years later. If it wasn't for Sheriff that night, if he hadn't sensed that intruder, if he hadn't fought to protect us, we might have never even known he was down there, and I dread to think what might have happened then. Our second terrifying encounter introduces us to Mandy, a sweet beagle pointer mix, in a house with a secret. When I was 15, Mandy was the most gentle, loyal dog you could imagine. Always wagging her tail, a happy, playful spirit. But one night, that sweetness vanished, replaced by an unsettling intensity. It was a typical school night. I'd brushed my teeth, turned off the lights, and was just crawling into bed, tired but looking forward to sleep. Mandy was curled up near my feet, half asleep, her breathing slow and steady. Just as I started to drift off that comfortable state between wakefulness and dreams, I heard it, a low, rumbling growl. It wasn't loud, barely audible, but it was enough to snap me back to full awareness. I opened my eyes and looked down at her. She wasn't looking at me. Her entire body was tense, her eyes fixated on my closet door. At first I laughed, a nervous, dismissive chuckle. "What, Mandy? You see a ghost?" I whispered, trying to sound brave, though a shiver had already traced its way down my spine. She didn't move. Her gaze remained locked, unblinking, on that closet door. Minutes stretched into an eternity, then an hour. Every time I thought she had finally calmed down, every time my eyelids grew heavy, she'd let out another soft but deeply tense growl, a constant, unsettling reminder that something was wrong. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I fell into a restless sleep. But sleep didn't last. Around 2 a.m., I jolted awake. This time, her growling was louder, more urgent, filling the silent room with an ominous sound. I sat bolt upright, my heart pounding, a cold dread washing over me. Across the room, Mandy was standing in the middle of the floor, not by my feet. Her usually smooth fur was standing straight up along her spine, bristling with alarm. She was still facing the closet, a sentinel guarding against an unseen threat. I grabbed my phone, fumbled for the flashlight app, and aimed the narrow beam towards the closet. The door, which I distinctly remembered closing, was now slightly ajar. My blood ran cold. "Mandy?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, thick with terror. She responded with one sharp, explosive bark, a sound that ripped through the silence. And then I saw it. The attic hatch, directly above the closet, was cracked open, a small dark gap against the white ceiling. My blood turned to ice. I didn't hesitate. I bolted out of the room, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and ran straight to my parents' bedroom, shouting their names. My dad, groggy and confused, initially tried to reassure me, thinking it was just a raccoon in the attic, or my overactive imagination spurred by a nightmare. But when he walked into my room and saw Mandy, still rigid, still growling, her eyes fixed on that half-open attic hatch, his expression changed. The sleepiness vanished, replaced by a grim determination. He opened the closet door, grabbed the pull string for the attic ladder, and slowly, carefully, peeked into the dark void above. Seconds later, a loud, guttural yell ripped from his throat. It was followed by a crash, then the distinct sound of glass breaking. Then my dad shouting at someone, his voice filled with fury and alarm. A man tall, bearded, and filthy dropped out of the attic access and sprinted towards the hallway, a shadowy figure of pure terror. Before I could even scream, before my mind could fully process what I was seeing, Mandy lunged. With a ferocity that seemed impossible for such a sweet dog, she clamped her jaws around his arm. Her grip was iron, unyielding. The man howled in pain and tried to swing her off, but Mandy held on, a relentless, furry force of nature, until my dad, now fully engaged in the struggle, tackled the intruder to the ground. We called the cops, who arrived quickly. They later told us the man had been living in our attic for days, maybe even longer. They found food wrappers, a flashlight, and even a small backpack up there. He'd apparently been sneaking down while we were at work or asleep. To this day, I can't look at that attic without feeling a deep, pervasive chill. And if it wasn't for Mandy's unwavering vigilance, who knows what that man might have done, or how long he would have remained a silent, terrifying resident in our own home. Finally, we have a story of youthful innocence shattered and the incredible courage of a family dog. When I was 11, my little brother and I had a ritual, evening walks with our dog, Buster. Buster was a magnificent animal, half husky, half German shepherd, huge, strong, and incredibly protective. These walks were usually the highlight of our day, a chance to explore our neighborhood under the fading light. One night, it was just past 8 p.m., the streets were quiet, the last traces of daylight giving way to dusk. We'd made it halfway around the block, Buster trotting happily beside us, his leash held firmly in my hand. That's when a man turned the corner ahead of us. He was tall, perhaps in his 40s, dressed in a nondescript hoodie and jeans. He caught our eye, smiled, and waved. "Hey there, kids. Nice dog you've got," he said, his voice smooth, almost too friendly. I nodded politely, offering a small, uncertain smile back, but something about him immediately felt off. There was an unnerving quality to his gaze, a subtle wrongness that made the hairs on my arms stand up. We kept walking, trying to put distance between us. Then, my brother, usually fearless, whispered, his voice tight with fear, "He's following us." I glanced back, trying to be discreet. The man had stopped, pretending to be engrossed in his phone, but his body language was all wrong. He was watching us, waiting. Every time we turned a corner, he'd reappear, a little closer than before, a shadow steadily gaining on us. The easy joy of our walk dissolved into a growing icy terror. We were almost home, the porch light a beacon of safety, when I felt my brother's hand slip from mine. I turned, my heart leaping into my throat, and saw the man. He'd closed the distance. His hand was already on my brother's shoulder, a firm, possessive grip. My brother screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated fear that tore through the quiet evening. Before I could even react, before my mind could process the